Okay, so in this lesson 6 of our IELTS Terminator writing course, IELTS Writing for Part 1 for Academic IELTS, we're going to be talking about diagrams. Now don't worry, because diagrams are much more common sense than you might think. As I say, the promotions to this course, if you have average intelligence and an intermediate level of English, nearly everything in the writing is quite easy to understand once you get the concept. Don't worry. Let's go on. Here is a typical type of a diagram that you might see on a lot of IELTS exams. And of course the question will be pretty much describe what you see. So, diagrams. They simply show a process, and you need to describe that process. Remember, no opinions, not necessarily have to make any conclusions most of the time. So, let's look at the type of vocabulary that we might need to talk about diagrams, particularly a process, which is what most diagrams are about. Let's go away from this diagram and think about making a cup of tea. If your friend has never had a cup of tea in his entire life or her entire life and says to you, "How do you make a cup of tea?" Where would you start? You can pause this video now if you like and start thinking about how would you describe the process of making a cup of tea? Think about it. When you think you've got it, come back and start the video again. Okay, done that? Your friend knows how to make a cup of tea now? Alright, let's see if we think the same. Where would you start in describing a cup of tea, making a cup of tea? What would you do first? Then, what would you do? What would you do next? What would you do after that? Finally, what would you do last? So, do you see the words in red? First, then, next, after that, finally, and last? They are sometimes referred to as signpost words because they are like signposts telling us, or in our case, telling the examiner, something is changing. Vocabulary notebook time. Here are the words we had a look at just a few moments ago. First, then, next, after that, finally, and last. Now, can you think of some other words that mean the same as the red ones? Here's a hint when you're looking for these sorts of things. If you have Word on your computer, you can type one of these words, highlight it, then go to Review, look up thesaurus. It will give you alternative words to use for the same meaning. So, halt the video, pause the video, and see what words you can come up with that mean the same as the ones in red. Have fun. Start the video when you come back and you're ready. Okay, let's assume you've done that. What are some other words that mean the same as the red ones? See if we think the same. For first, we could say initially, to begin, at the outset, to start with. For then, we could say afterwards, subsequently, following that. For next and after that, we can use the same words that we use for then. Finally, we could say at last, lastly, after all, in the end, to conclude. And of course, last means the same. How did you do? There's probably more. Check it out. Alright, the words for then, next, and after that can be used anywhere in the description except for first or last. But first and last can go nowhere else except at the beginning or at the end. Remember, like we've said about all our vocabulary that we've been building, you don't need to know all these words. Just pick the ones that you are comfortable with, but be sure you know at least one for each signpost. Okay, here is a typical diagram that you might see in an IELTS exam. Over here, of course, are some notes which are not on your exam paper. You have to make these up yourself. See how it says we've got about 4 paragraphs? That's about right. So let's see. Let's make sure we write an introduction and an overview of the diagram. What's it all about? Paragraph 2, how the process begins up to the production of long molecules, in this case. And then paragraph 3, we might go from molecules to the mould. What happens there? And paragraph number 4, what happens to the finished product? So there we have it in 4 stages. We break it down like this to make it simple for us. Don't forget, in the introduction, etc., we just make an overview. This process, this picture shows the process of blah blah blah. Do we know exactly what it is? No, we don't. Does that matter? No. We only take the information we know that we can get from the diagram. So we might say, this diagram shows the process from the oil refinery to the packaging of some plastic moulded product. We don't know what it is. We don't care. Right, and down here we start with paragraph 2. First, to begin with. And then all of this is the then, after that, next, blah blah blah. And number 4, finally, in the end, to conclude, the goods are packaged in boxes and waste products are discarded and the boxed products are stored in a warehouse. Okay, well, let's have a look at this. Now that you've got a good idea, can you describe this process in the diagram? You need to write about 160 words and set it out in 4 paragraphs. Start with an overview. This diagram shows. This time when you write this, use a clock. Try to get it done in 20 minutes. Remember, plan. Plan. Fail to plan is a plan to fail. Okay. Do you need to know what they are making or who the people are? No, you don't. So don't waste time on non-relevant questions. Just get on with the job. Pause the video. Go. Now you're back. Did you write 160 words in 4 paragraphs? Did you set it out pretty much like this plan? You might have a slightly different plan. That's okay, as long as it works for you. And did you separate your paragraphs with a blank line and indent the first word of each paragraph? We'll talk about those a little later. So describing a process or a diagram is not quite as scary as you thought. Maybe you want to practice by describing a few others. It's a good idea to use words that are not the same as in the diagram if you have them, but they should have the same meanings. Here's one just to play around with. Here's another one. How does water get from the ocean into the rivers, and what happens to it then? Remember, do not quote exactly the words that are in the diagram. You will lose marks. Of course, there's probably not much more that you can, not too many words you can use to replace snow, but where you can replace other words, do. All right, have fun. Now you know about diagrams. We should be all sorted for going on to part 2 of the writing process in the IELTS exam.